Hi friends, Mickey Mankis here and welcome to Out the Back Door. I've had a few of you reach out to me because you're interested in becoming a homesteader. So I want to talk about a few things that I've learned over the years. Join me. Alright, before I go inside and sit down and get comfortable with a cup of coffee to talk to you, I'm outside right now. I've spent quite a few hours already doing chores. That's something I do every single day, chores. Well, even as a regular homeowner or living in an apartment and you have a job, I'm sure you have chores, but we've got a lot more out here. So I finally finished most of that up. I just got done hauling some wood in so I can get another fire going because I let that go out this morning and now the temperature's dropping. So in order to warm up the house, got to get the fire going. Living in the country, the rural area, is a lot different than living in the city or even in an urban area. And I know a lot of you are just anxious to get out of that big city. You may be in an apartment, say New York. I looked that up. For a 2-bedroom apartment, you're paying like $3,500 a month? Seriously? You know how that would be an awesome mortgage payment, you know? So anyway, so I know a lot of you are looking at, you want to get out of that concrete jungle, especially nowadays with everything that's going on, and you want to get to a more quiet place. You may feel more secure and safe. Here we go. All right, I did take a bunch of notes and I am going to refer to them because I don't want to forget to mention anything that I feel that is important for you to know. I do want to say, any of you that are homesteaders, and by chance if you do watch this or start, if you have any suggestions and comments that you feel are important that I have forgotten about, please leave them in the comments below so that the people that are interested in being a homesteader can check those out also. So thank you ahead of time to all you homesteaders out there. All right, now, definition of a homesteader is being self-sufficient, self-reliant. Okay, what's that? You're trying to take care of yourself as much as possible without being dependent on outside sources. So one thing that you really want to start getting into when you've got a homestead is gardening. Maybe you want to do livestock. We don't have livestock, but we actually hunt and fish to supply food besides our gardens. And then that way we've got it year round. Another way to lean towards self-sufficiency is selling products from your home. Let's go back to the livestock for a moment. Say you are raising livestock or you have chickens that lay eggs, that type of thing. You can be selling that. I do soaps and salves, bath bombs, chapsticks, different things like that, little odds and ends. I do sewing projects and everything, and I can sell those at farmers market or I can sell it on Etsy. I also sell some of my canned preserves. And when you get into like farmers market, you have to watch because you need to get permits. There's specific permits for certain cities and for your state. So if you're interested in something like that, you're going to have to do some research to see what the laws are in your area for that. But that's what self-sufficiency is. That's what a homesteader is. Some people go totally off-grid. We are not. But that would be a true homesteader. Okay, so there's kind of like 3 places people live and are considered: a city dweller, urban dweller, or a rural dweller. That would be out in the country. And then you do have the extreme. There's some people that are like backwoods, but we're going to call them rural also. They're totally off grid. Today what I'm going to do is share the things that we go through on our homestead where we live in our area. So that's what I'm going to be covering because I know it's going to be different for many different people. All right, this is kind of, no matter if you want to be an urban homesteader or a rural, this can apply to both types of people. Because if you're in the urban, you're kind of on the outskirts of town. You still have an area where you can put up a garden. Maybe your city allows chickens, you know, that type of thing. So you could apply those same principles, but you've got a little bit of an advantage in a way being in town, but yet I've got an advantage of being out of town. So anyway, okay, let's cover those areas. Some of the things you really want to think about if you're getting ready to buy a home. You're deciding, hey, I want to be a homesteader. I want to get out of the city. I want to get out of the urban area. I want to get into the country. And that's what I'm going to talk about today is country living, what we do. Now, we do have people around us, but it's like they're far enough down the road that I really don't see them. So it's like we're not totally secluded, but we do have our privacy. And that's one of the big pluses about living out in the country. All right, so things to look at is the location. Where do you want to live? What kind of climate do you like? Look at the types of seasons they have. Yes, everybody has 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall. But some are closer together where the temperature doesn't vary as much. And then where we live, I'm going to be talking in Fahrenheit, not in Celsius. Okay, so our temperatures can range commonly anywhere from 45 below 0 Fahrenheit up to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's a big span. Let's go back down. Okay, so we usually don't reach the 105, and when we do, it's like, okay, we're all whining about it. It's too warm out. And when it gets super cold, it's like we just keep putting on more layers and more layers of clothes, and there we go. But there's another thing you've got to watch is the wind chill factor if you do live in a cold climate or season area like we do. Right now, this winter has really been brutal. The wind chills have been just, you know, if you're outside for anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, you could end up with frostbite because we have sub-zero temperatures for so long of periods. And then all of a sudden, you know, the wind picks up and it gets even colder yet. Now, we have a hard time surviving outside in that element for any length of time, but think of all the wildlife that has to. Okay, the wildlife can handle it. Now you're thinking about, I want to have livestock. Tell you what, that livestock is going to fit in the same category as us, so you got to make sure that you're going to have shelter for your livestock. And before I forget about it, it's like, you know, we've got to eat. Your livestock has to eat. So you're going to have to supply food for them also. Okay, so we've got different types of seasons and the locations and everything. So think about, where is it that you really want to live? Do you want to live where in the winter it's snowy or not? You know, you're going to look at that. Look at elevation. Do you want to live up in the mountains? Do you want to live down by the coast? I mean, it's like, where do you want to go? Think about that ahead of time. Don't just say, oh, well, I'm going to move here because, you know, this has got great ratings. You know, it's like, this is the place to go and everything. It's like, do your research on this. So now, you're going to look at the property. How much property do you want? How much do you want to work? How much do you want just so that you're kind of like keeping, you know, the neighbors out? You know, that type of thing. You're going to look at the dwelling place. You're going to check the structure out. Or are you going to start from scratch and start building, you know, a home? As a homesteader or homeowner, you're going to have a mortgage payment. You're going to have to pay insurance on your home. And you may have to put riders on specific things, especially if you live out in the country. You're going to have property taxes to pay. And if you don't do that, they come and take your place away from you. You're evicted. So those are like 3 things you have to think of right off the bat. Another thing is like, how far out of town do you really want to live? You've got to commute. Okay, so if you work every day, you know, say 5 days a week, 6 days a week or whatever, how far is that commute going to be? Running in and out of town from the country, you just don't do that. You start planning out all your stops. It's like, okay, I've got to go to work. Now I've got to stop and get gas. I've got to pick up groceries. I've got to go to the hardware store and get these items. You're going to do that all in one trip because you're not going to keep running back and forth into town. That just does not work. Another thing that you want to check out when you're looking at the piece of property that you may be interested in is the septic system. Yeah, there's no regular sewer where we live. We have a septic system. So all of our sewage gets dumped into a septic tank and then gets pumped out through our septic field and then out back. So that's something that you need to check in on and make sure that that's up to code, and hopefully it's newer and everything. Also, your well water. There's no municipal water supply here. You have to have a well. And how far down is your well? Is your water quality good? You know, these are different things that you need to check in. Okay, now you're going to be checking the structure of your home. Up in our area, most people have basements. And I know down south, the southern states do not because of flooding, which makes total sense. So that's why I said it depends on where you want to live. So you're going to check the structure of the building and everything also. Another thing to think about when you're thinking about a location for living is your weather. What type of weather patterns do they generally have? I mean, I realize, you know what, folks? Hey, I'm just going to be blunt. We're living in the end of end times, okay? There, I said it. Things are just going to hell everywhere. The weather's messed up. I mean, there's earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes. You know, we had a tornado in the winter not long ago, just an hour south of us, and the weatherman even said, in all of his history, all of his time of being a weatherman, he's never seen tornadoes up here in the wintertime. Okay, I'm thinking in general now. Okay, what kind of weather are they going to mainly have? Now, we have a lot of snow and cold during the wintertime. We may have droughts. The last couple of years, we've had droughts during the summer, where generally we have not. But I mean, it's like, okay, think about that. During the drier season, is it super dry? And where are you going to get your water sources from? Especially if you've got livestock to water or the gardens to water or anything like that. Some areas kind of like I said, the weather is closer together, so it's not as drastic. But do you live in Tornado Alley? I don't want to live where there's a ton of tornadoes. Do you have a lot of thunderstorms with hail, that type of thing? Are these common things? Floods. Do a little bit of checking on the history of common weather patterns. And take that into consideration also. When we get snowstorms, we have blizzards. I mean, think of Star Wars movie, you know, and they're flying through all those stars coming at you, you know. Try driving in that stuff. So that's another thing to think about. If you want to live up in the mountains, if you want to live in a snowy range, if you want to live in an area that floods out a lot, you better have a 4x4 vehicle, 4-wheel drive. Or all-wheel drive, but I would highly suggest you at least have one 4-wheel drive vehicle in order to try to help you get through. I want to give an instance. Quite a few years ago, we had some really heavy rains, and it flooded out our areas and stuff. There was a gentleman that lived probably about 10 miles from us, and he's got to cross over this little bridge area because there's like, you know, a river. You know, so he's crossing over to get to his home, and he lives on a lake. And he had heard about all these floodings that were supposed to come in. You know, they were warned. So in order to get to work the next morning, what he did that evening is he drove his car across the bridge and parked it quite a ways away from the river area. All right, so the next morning when he wakes up, they look out, and all they can see is water everywhere. And so he took his canoe, and he paddled across all this water until he got to dry enough, you know, land where he could get out and pull it up and out. And he left it up in the bushes there, and he got it in his car, and he went to work. And he came home that night, and he parked his car where he had it that morning, and he got in the canoe, paddled across to get back home. You know, these are kind of things that you have to think about when you live out in the country, when you're in a, you know, rural area. A lot of different things can happen. Another thing with, wintertime. That I guess I keep going back to winter a lot and the snow and everything because that's the season we're in right now. And I mean, I had to get the wood stove going. I mean, that's how we keep it warm in here. So anyway, snowplow. When we get snowstorms, I'm either out. We have a fairly large driveway, and I'm either out shoveling or snow blowing, or we have a plow on our ATV. We do not have a truck or a Jeep or anything like that with a plow on it. We just have the ATV. Now, Mr. Mankus has been working ridiculously long hours. I don't remember the last time he had a day off. He's the one that normally does the plowing, so I'll take the snowblower out. So there, you're thinking about maintenance. You've got to clean your driveways out. How long is your driveway? we looked at a different piece of property, and we were kicking around the idea of moving and stuff, and it was like the driveway was so long, it was like a short road. Now we would have to buy a pickup and a plow for it in order to just keep that clean to get out to the highway. I have taken that upon myself to do as a chore because of Mr. Mankus being gone as many hours as he is. I don't expect him to come home super late at night and then have to try to clean up the yard and everything. But we're not on the main county road. We're on a side road. And because we're on a side road, it may take up to 2 days before the plow comes down and cleans us out. There's been days that I can't get my car out of the driveway, and even if I did clean up our driveway, I wouldn't be able to get down our road. So it's like, I'm stuck here. So there's been instances also where there's been downed trees. We've had windstorms come through. That's another thing. Watch straight winds. Tornadoes are bad, but straight winds are just as bad. And all of a sudden, we had trees down across our road. Now you can't get out. So, do you have your chainsaw? Do you know how to use your chainsaw? So you got to clear the road because nobody else is going to come clear the road for you. Same thing with even on the property during these windstorms and stuff that we've had. We've had trees down everywhere, and it's like, Mr. Mankus and I have got to get out there with the chainsaws then. I use the small one because I'm not physically capable of handling a larger chainsaw anymore, so I've got what's called an arbor chainsaw. Perfect size for me to handle. But I can only cut probably, 10, 12-inch diameter pieces of wood. I wouldn't try anything bigger than that or whatever safely to cut that up. Otherwise, he gets the big one out to, cut the big stuff down. We had, I'm trying to think, it was probably 5-6 years ago maybe. We had a beautiful maple tree in the front yard here, and it was just off the side of the driveway. For some reason or another, Mr. Mankus didn't put his truck into the garage that night. I don't know why. I know it was in the fall, but it couldn't have been late fall because the leaves on the maple tree were still green. But we had a terrible snowstorm that night, and we woke up and everything was white. But because it was in a warmer season when this happened, the snow was extremely heavy. And when I looked out the front window, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got big branches broke and snapped and fell off. And I was only half awake when I was looking out, and I'm like, calling to my husband, and it's like, come look at this. And next thing I'm like, ooh. Our tree had split in half. Let me see if I can find pictures of when we went out to, check out all the damage and everything that happened during this storm. Because, it wasn't just that tree. We had other trees come down also. But the tree just missed coming down on the pickup truck. The tree came down into the apple tree and split in 3 directions. And there was part of it still standing upright, and you could hear it. I was out there. I was trying to videotape with, my phone. You could hear it cracking because of the weight of the snow hanging on those leaves caused it so much stress that tree just came down. So, the weather, the elements, can be so destructive, even when you're looking at something you think is so strong. Because that maple is such a hard wood out there and everything. And it took the tree down. We had other trees I was taking pictures of. They were laying on top of our power line. I'm really, really surprised. Thank you, Jesus, that we didn't lose power. Just like, anything can happen. But there we were out with the chainsaw, and there's Mr. Mankus up on the ladder. The parts that were still up and knew were going to come down, we had to get that cleared out. So we had a big project there. So, things can happen. Nature can happen, and you've got extra chores to do than when you're living out here. Those are just some of the things to think about. Also, when I was talking about droughts, now last summer was really, really bad. We were getting concerned. We were really watching how much water we were trying to pull out of the well. But the water table that runs through this area, we've got other families, other homesteads out here that are pulling out that same water table, and they may not be conserving on it, and we were not getting any rain. No rain whatsoever. We had wildfires about an hour, not even an hour north of us. Some of them were like a half an hour north of us, where they were, 1,000 acres, boom, gone in a day. And pretty soon we're like hearing, way, way more than that. I mean, our wildfire didn't get out of control as bad as it had out in the West. But still, I mean, we were in a drought area there. It seemed like if you looked at the United States, the West, part of the Midwest and everything, we were in a drought and everybody else was in a flood. I mean, it was night and day. There's raging fires, and then there's like people are drowning. Now, where are you going to get that water source then if there's a drought? We have a pond on our property, and we pulled water from there in order to water the gardens. We didn't want to use our well water because we were being self-conscious of the fact that there's no rain coming down to go into the ground to supply the water table in order for us to pull water out. So, I mean, we have gotten those great big, I think they're 275-gallon water totes in order to start catching for rainwater and stuff. I've got to design some platforms to set them up on and find placement for those yet. But I mean, those are different things to think about, is like, your water source and stuff too. I mean, when you live in the city, whether it's a small town or it's, metropolis, you just take for granted that you've got electricity, you've got water, you've got, plumbing, all this stuff. Living out in the rural area, you can't take things for granted. Other things to remember when you're living out in the country is if there's an emergency. If you have a fire and you call 911, you're going to get a volunteer fire department. Bless their souls. Men and women are out there volunteering in all these rural communities to be on the fire department or EMS. But 99% of these people have other jobs. So if there's a fire and 911, dispatches to that fire department, the volunteer firefighters are notified that, okay, there's a fire and they need to respond. But now they have to leave work and get to the fire station and get the turncoats on, get into the fire rig and get out to your place. And by then, I'm standing at the end of the driveway going, don't even bother. The response time is so much longer. So just keep that in mind. The same with if there's an emergency and you need an ambulance, the paramedics, EMS, first responders. First responders, those are the volunteer firefighters. But I'm saying that time response is going to be longer also, depending on how far out of town you live and where the nearest hospital is. Okay, so I did hit on as far as vehicles, I have a 4x4, four-wheel drive vehicle. Some other things as far as vehicles kind of you might want to think about is an ATV. I know a lot of people are getting side-by-sides right now, but we've got a regular ATV, but we use that for a lot of yard work, hauling things around. We also use it for hunting. We use it for plowing snow, like I had mentioned earlier. Our yard is big enough that we have a lawn tractor, so for mowing the lawn, to use a push mower would be ridiculous. It would literally take over 8 hours just to do the main part of the yard. That's another thing to consider. How big do you actually want your yard? How big of an area are you going to maintain? So we've got the lawn tractor. Also, if you really get into it, you may want a regular tractor, a garden tractor. We do have a small John Deere, and Mr. Mankus likes to use that for the food plots. It saves wear and tear on our ATV with the discer and all that stuff. Also for heavy chores around here. And there has been an occasion that maybe a neighbor in our area needs some help, and the tractor does come in handy then. So I'm not saying you're going to run out and buy a tractor, because that's a big investment, especially with maintenance on it and, buying implements. I had mentioned, I was talking about the weather and, if it gets really bad, like storms, whether it's thunderstorms, windstorms, snowstorms. Let's talk power outages. So what are you going to do for power backup? If it's wintertime, it's not a big deal for the freezer because it is going to, hold its coldness. Now, if you've got your freezer in the house downstairs or something like that, that's a different story. You just don't go in it. I want to make sure that my refrigerator gets charged up in cycles to keep things cold in there. Same with the freezer if it's during summertime. You got hot temperatures out there and you don't want things thawing out. You go into your freezer and your refrigerator as little as possible, especially if you're aware that the power outage may be a while. last February, like down in Texas, they got hit with that snowstorm so horribly, and just they had no power for how long, and they were unprepared for that type of a storm, and they didn't have heat, and I mean supplies, and think about it. So there's another thing, power outage. I don't know if you want to do solar, if you're going to check into solar. We have not gone that route yet. Okay, so as far as the power going out and everything, a couple of ways to back up. You may want to get a generator. We have a dual fuel, so it'll run off of gasoline and propane. Some people go and install those great big home generators in the back of their homes or whatever, or you may want to go solar. Up in this area, I have kind of seen you have to have a lot of panels and a lot of batteries to do solar, because the snow likes to cover everything, and unless you're cleaning the snow off the panels, I know if they're at a certain degree, it should kind of like self-clean on its own, but we have a lot of cloudy days. We have way more cloudy days than we do sunny days. So your batteries aren't going to be charged as well as much, and then you really have to start watching how much power you're drawing from your batteries. Some of our family members have lived up at the hunting shack for a bit, and I mean, we have nothing up there, so they have solar. With all the cloudy weather and everything else, there have been times where they've drawn their batteries down to just about nothing, and they've had to use the generator as a backup then. Let's talk about summertime, thinking of power outages. Now, we have a basement. If you have a basement and you live in an area like us, you're going to have a sump pump in a hole, because the water's going to surround in and it's going to push up against your house, and so that you don't have leak in your house and everything, we've got a sump hole with a sump pump in it. And that pump knows when to kick on. When you got enough water filling it up and everything, it kicks on and it discharges the water out, so we don't have leaking in our, in the basement. Well, if the power goes out and we've had rain, torrential rain coming down, where my sump pump is running every 2 to 3 minutes. Our sump hole, I don't know how many gallons it holds, but you know what? Even in my top peak health or whatever, there's no way I'd be able to bail that water out fast enough, get up the stairs and throw it out the back, and get back down in time to get another scoop out, because my basement would be flooding already. That's how fast the water was coming in. So there's another idea. It's like, I'm thinking, okay, how fast can I go and hook up the generator to get the sump pump running? I mean, I was just like, what am I going to do? All right, here's another backup plan. Just an idea, to kick around. 12-volt pump. So you got a 12-volt battery down there as a standby, making sure it's charged up. You check it every now and then. But then that way you can drop the 12-volt pump down in there, and you're hooked up to the battery, and that's going to start taking over until your power comes back on. When I was talking, I'm going to back up a little bit for the snow and stuff. I was talking about we're either plowing, snow blowing, shoveling. We've got power outages during that time. Another thing you got to remember is cleaning off the snow off your roofs, because that weight can build up, and the next thing you know, you could actually have your roof cave in, or if ice starts building up underneath, you get an ice dam. That's going to cause leaks in the ceiling. So those are things that you have to remember in this type of an area. When it gets super cold around here, you've got to watch. We have block heaters on our vehicles, because if it gets super cold and we've got to keep our vehicles parked outside, then we have to plug them in. And I think most of the time those are hooked up to the oil pans just to keep the oil warm enough so it's going to circulate when you try to start up your vehicle. And then you're like just praying when you turn that key over and it's going. Okay. A lot of dead batteries. So that's another thing to think about. I mean, it's like you need to keep your vehicle sheltered. Now, when you're checking out the new homestead or potential things of thinking of heating, the heat source is going to be crucial. It's a necessity. All right, so when you're living out in the country, you're either going to get propane or fuel oil or wood. So we do have propane. Those are the two, fossil fuels that we're going to be mainly using to heat our homes out in the country. The next thing, like I mentioned, was wood. There's people that actually sell wood, cords of wood, dump this off. Now you're responsible for blocking it up, cutting it into pieces, and splitting it. Or there's a new outfit not far from here that they actually sell blocked wood, cut wood that you can buy. But that's expensive. So what most people will do is they go out and they fell trees, cut trees down. But you have to know what kind of a tree to cut down. First of all, we look for dead trees that are upright and that haven't been standing there forever, because then they're going to be punky and they're going to be worthless as far as firewood. For us, we usually look for like dead tamarack, because that gives us a really nice hot heat and will last longer. We cut birch, popple, not a whole lot of popple, but the tamarack, maple, oak. Your hardwoods are going to burn hotter and longer. And so that's what we keep in mind when we're going out and looking for wood in order to harvest. Yes, we're harvesting wood for a heat source. It just costs too much to go out and say, hey, I'm going to get you to bring wood into me or whatever. So we go out usually February or so, the end of February, and we start looking for the wood that we want. We'll take the snowmobile in our otter sled. For those of you that don't know what an otter sled is, that has to do with ice fishing. And Mr. Mankus hasn't had the chance to go ice fishing in so many years. So anyway, we take the otter sled. We'll hook that to the back end of the snowmobile. And we bring our chainsaws and everything and what other gear we need. Pushing poles, snowshoes, because we've got to go out in the deep snow in order to get to the trees we want. We fell the trees. We block them up out there, cut them into chunks, the size we know is going to fit into our wood stove. And then we fill up our sled and we keep hauling them in. We'll dump them off by our wood shed and we get a big old pile sitting out there. And we have an idea. We kind of know how many trees and what size and everything we need to take down in order to supply us with enough wood for the season. Now we do this, like I said, the end of February or so. That's going to give our wood enough time to season for fall, early winter, when we're going to start burning wood again. So you're going to look for the right kind of wood in order to burn. You're going to have to block your wood. You're going to have to split your wood, because you can't just put whole pieces of wood in all the time. You got to have split wood. And then you're going to season it. We cover ours with tarps, pieces of tin and stuff, so when it's raining, that it's just not becoming saturated, but yet you want an airflow through there in order for your wood to dry. I'm hoping that the next time we do go out and we're going to get wood for this coming up fall, I'll do a video on that so you can see what we actually do. So once we get that done, then come closer to fall, then we move a bunch of our wood into the house, into the basement by the wood stove. And so then that way it's drying. But here's a kicker. You go down in there after a while and you can hear crunching. Yeah, it's bugs. Beetles. And they're munching in the wood. And the first time I heard that, I thought, what do we have in the wood pile eating? But this is every year. So then things are all closed up and it's cold, and pretty soon we've got mosquitoes flying around in here, and it's like, where are all these bugs coming from? It's because we hauled them in with the wood. So if you do that, don't be surprised if all of a sudden you have bugs in the house. It's just part of living out in the country, okay? Being a homesteader, a true homesteader, is not glamorous. There, I said it. You might think that, that's my dream. I want to be a homesteader. Well, good for you. But this is why I'm doing this video, just to share with you things maybe you didn't think about before you're like ready to jump in and be a homesteader. I will share the pluses at the end. I'm not trying to scare you off. But anyway, okay. So what I've been doing is, so I'm not burning up all of our propane because it's been so cold. I burn wood. Kind of the general rule of thumb, if it's below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm burning wood for heat. And so I've got to also rearrange our wood piles and everything so I don't have it coming tumbling down, because I need different sizes in order to start the fire. I've got to clean out the ash tray. Pretty soon the ash bucket's full. I've got to take that out to the garden and I've got to dump that out because there's certain areas that do need the ash to supplement into the dirt for nutrient and to regulate the pH balance. So it isn't like, oh, I'm going to burn wood and that's it. So here's a little bit of a clip. This morning when I went downstairs, I was getting the fire ready. So I cleaned out the ash tray and dumped it into the ash bucket. And then I went and I crumpled up some paper and threw that into the firebox. And I had some kindling there and put that in. And then I put a couple of smaller pieces of wood in there so that they were going to catch on fire faster. And then I started putting in my larger pieces of wood on top of that. Well, then I light it up, but I got to make sure that I've got my damper open and I've got the ash drawer open part way, so I've got a good draft coming underneath it to really ignite that fire. Wood heat's a little bit harder to control as far as temperature-wise. But while I was doing that, I realized I was low on kindling. So at the same time, I'm watching to see how the fire is taking off and getting it going. I went and I stopped to split up some kindling also. So that's just kind of part of that. It isn't where it's just, you know, oh, I throw a piece of wood in and throw a match in and boop, boop, I got a fire. Another thing really quick about having a wood stove is you have to make sure that you are cleaning your chimney out so that you don't end up with a chimney fire because creosote builds up in there. So we usually clean ours out at least twice a year. But that's another thing you have to think about. Means you need to go outside and climb up onto the roof and get in there with the big chimney brush. And I don't even remember what movie it was. Mary Poppins? I don't remember. It was many years ago. But there was a chimney sweep up there. I don't remember what you call those guys. They had a dirty job. Another thing you might think about, I do feel secure out here, but you may want a security system, especially the way the world is going now. Even though we really keep an eye on each other and everything on the road, we've had some break-ins. We've had some thefts happen. And so security system is a good thought. That way, I'm also aware of if I've got deliveries coming, I know that they're here. You know, without going out later on and something that shouldn't have been frozen is frozen. Or that, you know, what do you call them? Porch thieves. I don't know them. All you thieves out there that run around looking for packages on people's porches and you grab them, ain't gonna happen here. Security system, there's a lot of different kinds out there. You can even start by something simple and put in like driveway alarms. Where it dings if somebody, you know, comes through. You've got different settings on it, you know, sensitivities, different things like that. Or you can set up security cameras. So that's just a thought. Okay, one of the first things everybody thinks about when you're saying homesteading and self-sustainable, self-reliant is putting up a garden. And a couple of things that you need to be aware of is garden placement. What are you going to want to plant? How much sunlight is it going to need? How much shade might it want? You know, depending on what foods you want to plant. So you have to kind of survey the area if there isn't a garden on the property already to see where's going to be the appropriate place to put it. Also, as far as soil, are you going to have the right soil type for what you want to plant? Are you going to have to amend that soil? Now, I had mentioned in the video that I did about buying your seeds right now, that we have clay. We've got clay everywhere on the property here. So in order to do gardening, we have to do raised beds. You know, it would be so simple. You'd think, oh, you live out in the country. It'd be so easy to just, you know, take that plow out there or the tiller or whatever and till up the ground and everything else. And it's not fertile soil. So what we had to do is bring in soil. We had to bring in black dirt, sandy loam, mix this up. I mean, we were bringing wheelbarrow loads in order to fill this up. Plus, we go and supplement just about every year with cow manure, horse manure, anything like that. There's a lot of farmers around here, they want to get rid of the manure piles, but they'll sell it to you. We did find a gentleman that he said, you know, he kind of lives a little ways away from us, but he'll give it to us. He goes and gets his little bobcat. We bring the trailer out there and he loads the with the bobcat. So we'll be out there with the wheelbarrows, loading all the manure in and bringing it into the gardens. And then Mr. Mankus goes in with the tiller and mixes all that in there. So there's a lot of different things that you have to keep in mind as far as preparing a garden and for the foods that you want to grow. Also think in terms of the season. Where we live, we have an extremely short growing season. Those are things you have to keep in mind when you're planting a garden. But anyway, so then think about canning foods, dehydrating foods, freezing, preserving foods in different ways to put up for your family. Okay, as far as like communications and entertainment, we do not have a landline. We did. We never used it. We decided that was just an expense we didn't need and we got rid of it. Well, once we got rid of the landline, then we realized that, you know what? The cell phones don't always work out here. Our cell phone service isn't the greatest. A lot of times we have to do Wi-Fi calling on our phones through our internet in order to get better service. So these are different things you have to kind of think about also. Now, if we had to dial 911, I believe even if I only had one bar, or barely a bar or whatever, I would be able to get through for 911. But I mean, there were times that I'd be in the basement working on the wood stove and something didn't seem right and I wanted to call Mr. Mankus to double check, what do I need to do? This was quite a few years ago. And it's like, but I had no cell phone service. The call kept breaking up. He couldn't hear me. I'd come upstairs. I had one bar. I go in the basement. I have no cell service. So those are a couple of things to think about also as far as communication. And then TV. No, you don't get cable out here. You get satellite. I think you can get DSL out here. Yeah, because we have DSL internet. Otherwise, an antenna. And you get like 4 channels. And that's when you have to start using the remote on the antenna to turn it so that you're getting the right frequency, that you're hitting the tower, you're getting the signal, because otherwise you have snowy. And if you're old enough and know the rabbit ears on the TV, well, that's kind of the same thing with the remote control and the little antenna up on the roof. All right, if you don't know about that, ask your parents or grandparents. That's another thing to think about as far as like communication and stuff. We do have two-way radios that we use a lot. When we go to the hunting shack, we always have the radios with us, but even at home, if we're going to be further distance away, instead of trying to scream to each other, we just use the radios. Imagine yourself cut off for 1 week from all civilization. You can't get supplies or anything. Are you stable enough at home and have the skills in order to make it for a week without the outside help? Homesteaders have to rely on that. They can't rely on everybody else. That's the part, you're growing into homesteading. Now, I want to say,
homesteading is not for everybody.
I realize that. It takes a certain kind of person that wants to have that style life. And I wouldn't trade it in for anything. I wouldn't. As much of like the doom and gloom that I shared with you as far as homesteading and everything, I would not trade it in. I have security out here. I've got peace out here. It's nice and quiet. The neighbors on the road, we all take care of each other and look after each other. It's like we've got our own little community on the road out here. So even though I lived in a small town, a small community before, I love it out here. I would not want to have to go back to town. I really wouldn't. But it's taken many years to get to the point of where we're at. This isn't going to happen overnight. You have to put a lot of work into it. So if you do decide you want to do this, take small steps. But think ahead. Think this out first. Sit down and write things on paper and go over it. I mean, if you're a single person, you're going to have more responsibilities. If you're a couple, think about how are you going to split up chores and such. Most everybody should have chores, period. That's why when we're young, our parents raise us up doing chores. We're being prepared for real life when it comes. We're being prepared to take care of ourselves, and we will have chores to do. That's just what life is about. But I do want to say the one thing I've noticed. The older I've gotten, it gets harder. And when I look at people in their 70s and 80s that are doing that, it's like, okay, that's not too far down the road for me, but yet it's like, wow. Even from the age of 50 to 60, I noticed a big difference on my strength and everything and how I've been able to do things. And I've had to learn to do things a little bit differently so I don't hurt myself, or I need to slow down. I need to accept the fact that I can't do what I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So just keep that in mind too. Like I said, I would not give this up for anything. I love it out here. I know a lot of you are really thinking of security, someplace to just get away from all that's happening in the world right now. And I guess that's kind of why I wanted to reach out to you. And you younger people that you want to buy a home. A lot of this stuff will apply to you, even if you live in town, in a small town. If you live in an urban area, you can still apply a lot of what I have shared today with that type of a lifestyle also. Like I said, well, we're not totally off grid or anything, so I can't share solar power, wind power, or anything like that with you. We're striving more and more to be self-reliant, self-sustainable. Somebody asked me one day, so what classifies you as a homesteader? Self-sustainability, striving to be self-reliant. You can't find that in the concrete jungle. Those are just highlights that I could think of that I wanted to touch base on. And I hope it gives you something to think about before you jump into this. And if you do decide you really want to get into this, good for you. Good for you. I'm excited for you. Okay, so, all right, I'm done rambling for right now. I want to thank you for joining me today. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and then you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. And if you do have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Give me a thumbs up and share. You know the routine. Anyway, until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. I really do. God bless.